I'm John Kohler, Sylvamo's paper professor. I'm finishing up a job that I need to get on press as soon as possible, so I'm making sure my files won't have any issues at the printer. I did speak with the printer as my job will be printed on a high-end digital press, so I wanted to make sure what I'm doing will be okay without any issues. With the speed jobs seem to be arriving at printers today, there is always a chance something will go wrong. Unlike years ago in the graphic arts industry, there is a lot more software available today for everyone to use to create work. It is critical that every person using these tools, meaning applications or special hardware, know the workflow and how it will relate with the printer you may be using, no matter how big or how small they are. So in this episode, I'll share with you 10 tips to get your files through pre-press to their press without any issues. At the end of the episode, I'll also let you know how I made out. Tip number 1, software. Unlike years ago, there is a lot of software available today for page layout, image manipulation, etc. At one time, Photoshop was about the only software available for image manipulation. But today, there are several competitors. Affinity Photo, Pixelmator, GIMP, for example, are a few competitors to Photoshop. Affinity Design or Graphic are among others that are now competitors to Adobe's Illustrator. We have far more choices today. However, try to stay away from non-standard software. The biggest thing you can do is make sure you are using the software that the print house also uses or at least has available. If a printer doesn't have the same software, much of the competitive software will at least allow you to save your files in another format that the printer can use. But always check with the print house you are using first. Make sure the software you are using is not hardware specific, meaning, it only works on a Mac and not a PC, and vice versa. Usually this isn't an issue like it used to be, as most print houses work in both the Mac and PC environment. The worst would be for you to lay out a job in an application the printer doesn't have, which would cause a delay in, your job. Tip number 2, color profiles. These are the ICC profiles for papers, for example. Talk to your printer to see what they will want. In almost all cases, you don't have to even use a paper profile, as the printer will add it for you, depending upon the paper being printed. The printer has fingerprinted their presses for coated and uncoated papers, and have created ICC profiles for those grades for their equipment. They may even provide these profiles for you to use as you work in your project, if you really think that will help you. If you are printing on accent opaque, for example, and are working in Photoshop or in InDesign, you can set a profile by going to Color Settings in the menu bar. From there, you could always set an ICC profile, which would be, of course, for uncoated profile for either web or sheet fed. But to be real, talk to your printer about profiles first when planning your project. Based on that, in almost all cases, you don't even have to apply an ICC profile to your project, as the printer will replace the profile you selected and replace it with theirs to match the paper and the press you'll be printing on. Tip number 3, converting color spaces. Okay, so you're working on an image in your photo editing program in an RGB or red, green, and blue color space. Now you are done. However, you are printing this image in a CMYK or black, cyan, magenta, and yellow color space. The two are totally different. You have 2 choices. 1, let the printer know the image is in an RGB format and for them to convert. But the best choice is for you to make a duplicate image and set up aside the first image, which is the RGB image. Then convert the duplicate image to CMYK. Now you will see the subtle changes from the conversion, and you'll be able to adjust that image, that CMYK image, to match your RGB image. That CMYK image is now ready for printing. The good news is most RIP software can do the conversion. However, it may not totally convert 100% accurate to your liking. The worst case is also for you to have an RGB images in a page layout program along with CMYK images. But Preflighting will take care of that. Tip number 4, fonts. Fonts. Everybody loves them. You can look on any computer today and you will find hundreds of them. Now, there are three types of fonts: PostScript, TrueType, and OpenType. 10 years ago, I would have definitely recommended not using TrueType. But most of today's RIPs can convert them to work properly, but knowing you might see some subtle changes to the font for print. So based on that, I still recommend kind of staying away from TrueType fonts, or at least check with your printer for his advice. The biggest thing today is making sure you have permissions to use the font for print. For example, if you download a font from the internet to use it and then create a PDF of your project, which then gets handed off to the printer, the font will not be embedded, which means it won't work. Yes, you'll see the display font, but it won't print. Many downloadable fonts are like this in that you think they're free, but to properly use them for print, you have to pay. I believe the best fonts to use are OpenType and PostScript fonts that work pretty much seamlessly between Macs and PCs. Tip number 5, image resolutions. For offset printing, 300 ppi, that's pixels per inch, is always recommended. The guideline would be the ppi, that's pixels per inch again, should double the lines per inch you are going to print. In other words, if you are going to print, say, on accent opaque at 200 lines per inch, your images should be scanned at least at 400 ppi. However, in most cases, 300 ppi will work below 200 lines per inch. Also, with all images, you can shrink to a point, but don't try to reduce an image from 100%, say, down to, say, 15%, and then place it in your layout program. You'll clearly not be happy with the results due to such a drastic reduction, as you may see artifacts in the print. Also, when scanning the images such as vector art, scan at least at 1200 ppi for the best results. For laser or inkjet printers, scan resolutions will be different, and I'll cover that in another IPIQ episode. Tip number 6, spot colors. Make sure you make the spot color you are using named. If using spot varnish, for example, which is a spot color, make sure it is marked as a varnish spot color. If you're printing on a 4-color press only and have spot colors in your project, well, make sure the Pantone matching color, or PMS spot, is created as a process spot color, meaning a CMYK process build. This means that if you are printing, say, for example, PMS 300 on a 4-color offset press, make sure it is a process spot color, not a spot color on its own. I have seen times where the creator has created several spot colors and not converted the process, only then create a PDF of the project for the printer. When the printer opens the file, they see a bunch of separate spot colors along with the 4-color work, and the project is only printing on a 4-color press. The creative didn't change the spots to process. Oops. Tip number 7, bleed marks. When printing something small such as postcards, business cards, etc., 1/8 inch bleed is fine. When doing larger projects such as catalogs, posters, booklets, etc., use 1/4 inch bleed. If the final document is then created as a PDF, make sure to check your trim settings in Acrobat that they are correct. However, in almost all cases, the printer will be checking those. But if they are correct, that saves the printer time from having to make the changes or additions themselves. Tip number 8, trapping. This tip is ultra easy. Many page layout or other programs will let you set trapping. Don't do it. Let the printer you are using set trapping. They know their systems, equipment, tolerance is far better than you do. So again, my recommendation, just let the printer do the trapping. Tip number 9, pre-flighting. You know, as a pilot, I always pre-flight my aircraft to make sure all is well with the aircraft and myself before I head to the skies. We must do the same with our work. There are dedicated pre-flighting programs today. But you know, most page layout programs such as Adobe's InDesign do pre-flighting. This means the program will check your images, fonts, colors, etc., that they're all correct and alert you to any issues. Today, many files that customers send in are just high-resolution PDFs and not the InDesign bundle with all the files. The only problem is that if a change is needed, the printer may not be able to make it as they don't have all the files. The good news is a quick call and a new PDF solves the issue, but still costs some time. I have seen many times when files arrive, they lack the high-res images and only contain low-res, or a blend of both. Pre-flighting helps solve these issues. You can also do Preflighting in Acrobat as well before you send off the PDF to the printer. Tip number 10, the proof. Oh boy, now we're getting touchy. When I was a young pup in the printing industry, we didn't have a proof. Well, unless you want to call a blue line a proof. And actually, that was much later in my career. First, the proof. Unless it's from the offset press, it's an excellent representation of what the print may look like, but it will not be an exact replication. Remember, all proofing devices are not, in almost all cases, not using the same paper you will be using or the same ink you will be printing with. Today, the wide format inkjet printers are being used by many print houses. Today, the wide format inkjet color gamuts will also be slightly different from what you are printing, especially when it comes to spot colors. Spot colors will be made from the various CMYK and other specialized inks contained within the inkjet printer. So use the proof as a good guide, not an exact replication. The offset press you will be printing on will do that for you. Also, when you are done with your project and before you pre-flight it, in most layout programs you can check and print separations to make sure your spot colors are separate or processed. Also, produce a proof off a laser or a desktop inkjet printer for copy and other content errors. One bonus tip. In general, when printing accent opaque, Williamsburg offset, and other uncoated papers, 270% total ink coverage should be the maximum when printing offset. For coated, 300% should also be the maximum, again, when printing offset. But the best advice, always check with your printer you are using. Well, I hope this gives some of you newer creative folks or in-house creatives some good tips to get your files or PDFs to your printer with no issues. I have only touched briefly on each tip, so the final advice is always check with the printer you are using for their requirements. Well, my job turned out great, and the printer had no issues with my job, which is a 300-page book. Well, with that, I'm Jim Kohler, Sylvamo's paper professor. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and click on the bell to get reminded of all new episodes. So, I hope to see you in the next Paper Professor episode.